One of the major reasons why nothing works in this country and all of our institutions are collapsing is that very few people, especially those running those institutions, are capable of seeing beyond themselves. They don't care about anything greater than themselves. They don't recognize that anything greater than themselves can even exist. They certainly aren't focused on the larger mission of the institution, but instead are totally enveloped in their own egos. This intense self-focus destroys every institution down to the smallest and most essential one, like the family. The institution can't survive if everybody within that institution, everybody who's in charge of leading it, spends all day staring at their own reflections. Somebody needs to be focused on the grander, broader vision. Somebody needs to take the long view, a view in which they are not the central figure. But few people these days are capable of that. There's a term that's become popular on social media called main character syndrome. This describes people who imagine themselves to be the protagonists, the leads, and their lives to be some sort of cinematic feature film in which they are the star. You could really just use the term narcissist here because it has basically the same meaning, except that main character syndrome is helpful because it captures the way that so many people today tend to not only place themselves at the center of the universe, but also fictionalize the universe at the same time. They're the main characters in the story of their lives, but that story has only a tangential relationship to the truth. I mean, it's sort of based on true events at best. We could take this main character phenomenon and relate it back to the collapse of our societal institutions, and there's probably no institution that suffers more from this problem than the education system. The problem in education today, well, one of the great many problems, is not just that so many teachers are intensely ideological, but that they're also intensely self-centered, which leads them to believe that it can never be inappropriate for them to indoctrinate their students. After all, the class they're teaching is really all about them. Everything's about them. They are the subject. They've been hired to teach history or algebra or English literature or whatever, but their real job, as far as they're concerned, is to shape the students into little versions of themselves. And all of this explains the recent trend of teachers coming out to their students during class. I've seen at least 3 videos documenting this in just the last few weeks. We played one several days ago where a high school teacher records himself in class as he called the students' attention to himself and proceeded to inform them that he is non-binary and his preferred pronouns are all pronouns. He is all things to all people, as the Apostle Paul once wrote, though in a very different context. We're not going to play that video again, but we do have 2 more. First, here's another non-binary teacher talking about her experiences coming out to her students. And she's talking about them in response to a question from another teacher who is also non-binary. And here's what she says.
You can be reasonably assured that you are safe being out on your campus, then do it. Before coming out as non-binary, I would come out to my students every October on National Coming Out Day. I would use that as an opportunity for my students to learn how to receive somebody coming out to them in case that had never happened to them before. We used it as a way to talk to each other about empathy, about connection, about trust. It ended up being a wonderful experience that I had with my students every single year. So think about what you would have needed when you were in high school or middle school or whatever grade you're teaching. For some students, just the knowledge that a queer adult exists within their world is hugely impactful. You don't really have to do anything other than be visible for these students to feel safer and more accepted and more at home when they're on campus. It does so much for students who don't have that in other places in their lives. For that reason, my classroom is one of the gayest places probably on the planet. Everything is completely covered in rainbows. I've got flags everywhere. I've got queer literature because I want every student that I have to know that being queer is something that I am proud of, something that is not a secret in my life. It's something that I care about and something that connects me to other people. I'll end by saying that for me, being visibly queer is a non-negotiable. I introduced myself this year with my pronouns immediately. It was one of the first things that students learned about me.
You know, somehow the most irritating part of that was still the word impactful. Just an awful word. But that's beside the point. The point is that this pathologically self-absorbed narcissist enjoys the attention and self-congratulation of coming out so much that she does it every year. She has, by her own admission, turned her entire classroom into a temple to herself. The only thing that's missing is like the incense and the hooded monks chanting in an ancient language, as is this religious temple of self-worship. Every day in her classroom, it is a chance for all of her students to join her in worshiping herself. It is a celebration of her own sexual proclivities. And she doesn't feel weird about inviting kids to take part in that celebration, or forcing them to, in fact, because this is her we're talking about. And what could be more important? What subject could be more pressing than the subject of herself? That was also the approach of the teacher in the next clip, who recorded a video sharing her thoughts after having just come out to her 6th grade students. It was important that the 6th graders be told, who she likes to sleep with. They really needed to know that information about their teacher's sexual behavior, so she was sure to inform them.
So I just came out to my students. I've been wanting to do this for the past 2 years. Sorry, I'm like so emotional. And I just haven't had the courage to do it out of fear of judgment, mostly from their parents. But I had these kids in 4th grade, and now I have them in 6th, and I'm sending them to middle school, and I love these kids so much, and I trust them, and they make me feel safe, and I know they love me, and it just felt right, and I did it, and it was so beautiful. They had so many questions, which I loved. They wanted to learn, and they wanted to learn about me, and they were so eager, and a few of them clapped, which was so precious.
So you notice how this was a spontaneous and emotional video revealing her true feelings, and yet she took the time to edit and add the inspirational soundtrack in the background. I mean, it's hard to think of a better example of main character syndrome than that. Notice also how she says that they make me feel safe. That's an adult woman, a teacher, referring to the 11-year-olds in her classroom. And she says that they wanted to learn about me. I mean, maybe they did, or maybe they felt forced to pretend that they did. But whatever the case, do we send kids to school so that they can learn about their teachers? As far as these teachers are concerned, the answer is yes. What subject could be more important than the subject of themselves? And on the subject of themselves, what could be a more important detail than their sex lives? See, they see themselves as defined by their sex lives, and they see the world as revolving around themselves, which means that the world revolves around their sex lives. This mentality makes for dysfunctional people. And with enough of these people in the education system, whatever their sexual orientation, it makes for a dysfunctional education system. And that is why teachers who come out to their students are today, certainly, and finally, canceled. Hey, listen, hit the subscribe button. Do it right now. I demand it, and I thank you for your compliance. It is somewhat appreciated.